Chris and I are not machine learning experts, so I actually looked up federated learning because it seemed key to the whole value proposition. And I hadn't realized it was an actual technique. Federated learning is a machine learning technique that trains an algorithm across multiple decentralized edge devices or servers, holding local data samples without exchanging them, right? It's a bit of a mouthful, but I hadn't realized it's an actual technique. So if somebody's looking to solve that problem, it's very simple. You guys have the solution, right?
That's exactly it. It's a technique, and if you're speaking to let's say an enterprise machine learning engineer, the problem of getting access to data is universal, and that can be even internally. Think of, again, the example of a pharma company. Their data is distributed across multiple locations. It sits in silos, right? So
often on legacy systems. Is legacy systems a big challenge for you guys?
Legacy systems, I mean, that's a general challenge if you're doing machine learning. So if the data is not on the right infrastructure and the right structure, but even if it is, it can be, if you're operating globally, that data cannot move across geographical boundaries. And so you're running global clinical trials,
right?
But analyzing those global clinical trial data is not an option because this data cannot be moved across the geographical boundary. And so that's just poses challenges for literally every party that deals with large and meaningful machine learning ready data in sensitive regulated industries. And so that's essentially the solution to that problem.
Who would be a big global competitor that people might know the name of? Is it the likes of a Snowflake, or is it maybe somebody else?
Great question. So I think let's say the overarching problem of secure data sharing, that's a problem that has become more and more pressing over the last couple of years. And if you look at Snowflake and Databricks, their recent product launches are so-called data clean rooms, or sometimes they call it as well research environments, if it's a bit more like researchy. And that's essentially, you still have data, you still store it centrally, but you put boundaries around those environments, right? That's a data clean room. It's all like, it's a bit visual, right?
It's a great marketing term, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that works for some use cases, in particular when you can put controls on who gets access to what, and as well control on the data set level. So share those columns with those parties, but not with those, depending on the roles, right? So that's the data clean room type of offering. Now, what this still means as a business is that you're moving data. If it's large data, very sensitive data, you're typically uncomfortable doing that. So essentially the next wave of secure data sharing technologies will all be built upon a federated infrastructure. And
but you guys are ahead of the trend, it sounds like.
It's an early market. So in a couple of years, I mean, if you're speaking to the large cloud providers or data platforms, they are very aware of that problem. Their core architecture is built upon central, like the idea that data stays central.
A big data lake that you then,
So somehow for a company like Databricks, moving to a federated infrastructure just wouldn't make sense. But essentially how we are positioning ourselves is that we are integrating with the existing machine learning stack on the one side and the compute infrastructure stack on the other side, such that it will be very easy for a user of Databricks to use essentially Apheris and take the existing model and data pipelines and via the Apheris world tap into the world of third-party data assets.
Fascinating stuff.
Can I? Very fascinating. I suppose I'm a bit of a Gen Xer, and in my world, when I first started work, it was all about competing and beating everyone. So, I worked in investment banks. It was all about Morgan beating Goldman, and collaboration was not key to how you were set up. So clearly, I get it. What Gen Y, it started to change. Gen Z, it really is massively changed. I mean, everything's shared, and I get where you go. I suppose in principle, and I'm really interested to hear more, Robin, on with your interactions with, obviously you work probably with, I assume, a lot of like late stage founders or private technology companies, tick. But do you also work with large corporations, and within that, do they get this, or
Yeah.
is still a bit of kind of like my, mind bending? Are they somewhat reticent?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, the type of business that we have is exactly what you described. On the one hand, AI first type of businesses, so scale-ups, late stage tech companies, and enterprise companies in very regulated industries. So we have multiple top 10 pharma customers as clients. We have some of the leading manufacturing institutes as clients. So typically stakeholders that probably would belong to Gen X, as you called it. And I think the key here, so what you're saying is absolutely right. The key is not to build collaborative data ecosystems where there's like free sharing and everyone contributes, and there's just like everyone loves each other, and they're kind of like not commercial and competitive interests. So the big complexity of getting those initiatives off the ground is marrying the tech to setting up the commercial and contractual setups in a way that it creates win-win situations and incentivizes parties to collaborate for their own benefit. There are certain tricks and techniques that we've learned over the last couple of years of building collaborative data ecosystems around, as well the enterprise sector, where getting this right is really key to success or failure. I give a couple of insights into what are those methods. So quite obvious is choosing a set of partners that is not directly competing with each other, but have, from the nature of their business, an interest in actually coming closer to each other and working more with each other. So for example, a supplier-customer relationship often as well good as a slight power imbalance. So where you might have a customer that is like very dominant and suppliers that are competing with each other to gain, essentially to get more integrated into the value chain because they want to serve this customer. And then if they are starting to build collaborative data ecosystems along their existing value chain, they can start that with a flagship initial supplier and then essentially put a bit of pressure on the other suppliers to say, hey, if you're not participating in that method, we are essentially not having the right insights into what is being delivered. And so we cannot buy from you with the extent that we would like to. So those are like essentially ways to create those commercial incentives for all parties to do that. So leverage up by participating in the collaborative data ecosystem, you can sell more of what you do in your core, namely delivering a certain good to your customer, as an example.
Thank you. And is there are there specific verticals or industries that being a leader in this marketplace or this industry or the provision of this technology solution, is anyone, you mentioned pharma earlier, are there any other kind of segments of industry that kind of just get this and know it's the future?
Yeah, so pharma and healthcare, I mean, that's a massive industry, right? As well, like you can approach it from very different angles, but we are really operating in the classical pharma business, so drug discovery and development, but as well in the healthcare business, so around real-world evidence data, clinical data, those type of areas. So those are then more like digital health type of companies, payers, those businesses. So those that's our biggest traction. We're seeing very strong growth in manufacturing itself. In particular, the value chains are really complex. So semiconductors, like high performance materials. So where you have very strict controls, lots of IP sensitive data, very regulated, and high demands in terms of quality assurance. Those are industries that typically don't get the technology by the term, but they do know about the problem because they are trying to solve it, like with data use agreements. So they like really feel the pain, but they need to like be made solution aware. And then last but not least, where we are not really that active, but where there's a lot of growth is in the whole ad tech industry. So there are as well a couple of ad tech collaborative data ecosystems, and we are as well seeing more and more demand from that. But as we founded the business initially, we've very much focused on industries where we as well wanted to have impact, where we saw a massive problem that we need to solve, which speaks for our traction.
I suppose that's it. That probably is every industry at the moment, really, isn't it? I think.
So I would say like one industry that lends itself as well really well to this, but where we are not active, is the whole governmental sector. But you need a bit of more bandwidth to enter that as a young business. So our engineering leader, Eero, he is really a world-class engineering leader, has done it before, has as well worked in very regulated industries, has like led hundreds of engineers and taken companies from seed to IPO before. So really strong. And he said Apheris is dangerously mature in some aspects of its business. And that has to do with the type of company, like the type of service we bring, right? We are selling somehow trust, security, IP protection for something that is core to
especially in tightly regulated markets, it sounds like as well, right?
Yeah, so we needed to, and this is like a tribute to my co-founder. So he's the German physicist who doesn't do any mistakes. So, you know, like many things are very, very structured, and we are dangerously compliant for a young business. Started with enterprise business, and then we added the AI first scale up. So a bit untypical for a young company. Typically, you start with like the smaller companies, and then you grow towards enterprise. For us, it was the other way around. And for the AI first scale ups, we're going much broader and selling a lot more the tech capability. So that's why you as well read a lot of those technical statements. We're selling to a CTO, a head of machine learning, right? Really technical people that get their business. They search for this technology to fuel it and figure out the other things themselves. And so, I mean, fintechs, insurtechs, they get this, and they as well have a modern tech stack and data stack to operate on that. So there's definitely like markets within those respective industries that are mature. But yeah, again, depending on where you've been,
it starts with the capabilities.
I suppose if we look at, you know, your area, Robin, and adoption and where this is going to go, are there any blockers in the system? Is the main blockage in the system of people adopting what your business does, their lack of understanding or a lack of understanding at board level? Is there a lot of education? And then, you know, within that, going back to my point about the generative AI sort of an AI journey, does this sort of aspect of business become relatively commonplace in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, great questions. So maybe starting with what we've been seeing over Apheris, a bit more than 4 years old, and since its inception, we are like the mission of the company is to solve exactly this problem. Data can't move across boundaries. You still want to unlock value from it. How can you do so based on a federated infrastructure? That has been like our mission from day one. When I look at like my early days in 2019, I mean, like literally in every conversation, I explained like very like low level. Hey, look, there's machine learning. I hope you know like how it works. If you do,
this is what's machine learning.
This is federated learning. That's how it works. And you know, like was showing this graph of you send something off to those other sites, and then getting the models back, and you aggregate it, and people are like stuck. But hey, like how does this work? And so like compare that today. I go into meetings with like the CTO of an AI first scale up or an IT department that is digitally mature and buys Databricks for an enterprise. Like the amount of questions that I get is like, how does this integrate? How does this scale? What's the deployment process? What type of tools and connectors do you offer? What's your security standpoint? You know, like the maturity over those 4 years, and understanding
the awareness as well, and yeah,
like entirely different. Now, what the biggest complexities for our initial days was to actually figure out all of this, because there was no market, right? So we were essentially saying, hey, we have this cool technology. People said, yeah, that's great. I want to solve this business problem. So, hey, can I use this technology? Yeah, sure. Go ahead and license it. But then what are all the other pieces? Contracts, getting the other party online, updated on this, like all of those like problems that were like the big problems, right? And so we, in our early days, we did this firsthand. I mean, we licensed our platform, but we added lots of consulting around and just got collaborative data ecosystem off the ground, from model building to like solving the contractions. We're just doing anything to get this off the ground and learn what it takes. Now today, this is much more targeted. We have like some dedicated programs around getting this off the ground for like large scale initiatives. So a bit of program management around, but that's formalized. And we have like the tech capability where we know, hey, if you have that problem, you want to integrate that into your product, you know, kind of like how to incentivize the parties around, then you can buy this tech capability. So suddenly our problems are much more the type of problems you want as a tech company, which is scale, robustness, integration, and those things. And I'm most excited if I make our engineering team and our product team, who's like incredibly technical, if I lead to those challenges with kind of like the next steps of what we want to achieve with our product. And so right now we are getting quite some demands of training or fine-tuning foundation models on top of very large data sets via the platform. And so the demand for scale obviously like radically changes in those type of use cases. And so yeah, I think on your question, I think the markets are very much maturing, and as such as well the type of problems that essentially is blocking us from scaling this and finding adoption. Now, on our positioning towards, let's say, generative AI foundation models, so essentially a bit like taking the classical machine learning, which is essentially like advanced analytics with some like extra techniques, to large scale AI, which is like coupled to as well the infrastructure component, and like very different economics in terms of how it's being used, how it's being commoditized. Now, what many businesses not yet understand, but advanced ones start to understand, is the competitive threats and opportunities that arise through essentially having commoditized, pre-trained large models available that everyone can use. And now the key to compete as a business is essentially your ability to take those models and fine-tune it to something that only you own. For example, data, for example, model IP, for example, contact to a user. You just know how to like wrap around it. So that the technical piece is to be defined. And that's what Nathan Benaich means with verticalized AI and how you compute like alongside that stack. Now, taking a pre-trained model, fine-tuning it to sensitive data is something that you want to be very careful for in terms of where you store that data, who you give access to it, how you avoid that your way to compete is being used by others in a way you don't want. And so leaving that data on your own, in your own environment, and protecting it and still making it accessible, that's going to be a key priority for any company that wants to participate in that new value chain. And that's essentially that capability that we bring. So our mission as well is to essentially avoid that big tech is owning all the pieces of the tech stack. They're owning the infrastructure, they're owning cloud, they will be owning the pre-trained models, and it will just be a handful of companies that actually manage to get foundational models off the ground really well. So we want to own how to bring that to businesses that own sensitive data.
But big tech is like a Pac-Man, and you're a little pack.
Absolutely.
That they have a very good way of consuming. Now, on that point, Robin, I sense a growing momentum amongst good, well, superstar modern day founders like yourself across Europe, across the UK. There's probably a bit of a reticence to allow the Pac-Man to eat you up, even though obviously it comes with some bejeweled sacks of gold and silver and diamonds and all the other things we all dream of attaining. But I sense with your peers and the conversations I've had and increasingly read about, there is somewhat of a desire to remain as Apheris rather than Apheris being Pac-Man.
By big tech. Apheris by big tech.
Yes. So what was your perspective? Oh, could Apheris become the Pac-Man?
So great questions. First of all, I think maybe giving kind of like a bit of background on kind of like who are key stakeholders that are as well like helping us grow this company. And so one of our investors is like Ross Mason. He has built MuleSoft, like category defining company in the B2B data connectivity market. And our revenue leader, Bridget Fox, has built the EMEA sales founding team at Databricks. So Databricks is well a company that is partnered with the large cloud providers, has built a category defining company, and yet in some aspects as well competes with big tech on certain offerings, right? WS, SageMaker to Databricks, and still there's like complementary value. So I think what I'm not trying to convey is a Apheris against big tech and we are like directly competing. That would be a very bad strategy. What I think from an impact perspective, our mission is to avoid that big tech is essentially packing all of the or as much of the value chain because they're owning so much already. And so that's where we come in. Now there's a second question to you that you raised, which is what if big tech is starting to see that and see how essentially this let's say companies are participating in the value creation, they start acquiring companies, and I mean that's an obvious strategy of them, and they have the capital pools to do that. I think for us as a business, as well, let's say the founding story with what we set out for. So we aim to build the category defining company. And so we aim to build that company that stands there, still partners, integrate. So it's not us against big tech, but it's Apheris helping companies to unlock value from large scale AI with their own sensitive data. And that's the mission that we have. Now, the life of, let's say, founders and, let's say, founding stories is tricky. And I mean, everyone knows that, that there's ups and downs and there's like very challenging situations that founders are being faced in. And I've been in some of those, and I'm certain that I will get into some of those. But one thing that is absolutely clear for everyone at Apheris, as long as we don't see any reason why we should not become this, or why we cannot become this company, this category defining company around that, it's no option for us to not strongly bet on this outcome. And so right now, this is like not a question for us. And for the other side, it starts to become a question. We have meaningful business. This is like definitely an interesting problem, and companies start to look into that. So yeah, that's the generic answer that I would give.
No, great answer. For Apheris, what's on the horizon? And then, I'm also interested because we are obviously talking to someone in my, I'm a big fan of Germany, which obviously Germans always think English people are a bit like, oh, it's England v Germany. I love Germany. I've had fantastic times there. I was at the World Cup there in 2006, I think it was, had fantastic time. But, so what's the German scene like? Because, so Apheris and then Germany.
Yeah. So let's start with first. So first of all, I mean, I think the fact that many founders struggle based on, let's say, an adjustment in the market, I think a healthy adjustment in the market is like, undisputed. We've been raising our last round already in a very tough market. So I've been going out fundraising in May 2022 and then closing the round like 6 weeks after. So essentially, we've been
That's very fast.
Yeah. I mean,
with some great participants in the round: Local Globe, Octopus Ventures.
Those ventures led the round, Hill Capital, some good angels. So we had good fun.
Again, the love between England and Germany. There you go. Like that.
And I think like so I talked about Michael, the German physicist. So I'm somehow responsible for the upside, but we as well like always pay very close attention to having like very strong fundamentals, having a very healthy business. And so for us, I mean, it like raising in a tough environment was still like something we could do because we did have a meaningful business. We did have meaningful, strong fundamentals.
It's all about capital efficiency. All about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that shift is like reminding everyone that this is actually what, as an entrepreneur, you are supposed to do and should be focused
on. Be disciplined. Yeah.
And so essentially, I think for us, we are like from that market perspective in a neat environment with best-in-class talent. We have capital where we don't have to raise in 2023 at all. Probably as well with our current revenue growth, we wouldn't even have to raise in 24. But we'll hit our targets to be able to go out and ready, raise the next funding round probably by the end of the year. So that's like rough where we are. So I feel like quite confident that essentially this shift in market has been healthy, and we somehow played that fairly well.
Yeah.
On that being said, I think what we are experiencing and what every business is experiencing is that pressure from the general market, not just in the startup world. And so every company is doing cost-cutting programs. Much of our customers, enterprise customers, 50% IT cut, and those type of things. And so making sure the value that you're creating for your customers, the return on investment is extraordinarily high. They see as well the potential, but as well the fast ROI. That's like something that everyone is focused on, and we are as well. And it's not tricky with bringing a new form of essentially like doing business with data to a market, and then simultaneously being tracked against how fast can you create a return on investment on this. So that's certainly something that is challenging. That being said, we play well with the both excitement around generative AI and foundation models, as I just laid out. And this excitement is not just in AI-first scale-ups, but it's as well a threat that larger businesses see that they need to get on top of, and essentially think of ways like, how can I, assuming this world of commoditized foundation models is on the market, how can I secure my competitive edge? And so there are quite some large-scale initiatives that we've been selected as the core platform provider that is incredibly impactful and exciting work that we'll as well announce throughout the course of the year. So really excited about those items. So that's the Apheris side of things. Now Germany. Tough one. I love Germany as well. I'm as well like sometimes mixed in terms of how, let's say, the agility of Germany to respond to certain actions is not always extraordinarily high. We have global business, so we are not focused as a business on German type of customers.
US investors that are talking size, scale, and understanding of their business. But I suppose the real thing that has changed, because obviously when, 10 years ago, you had to physically move your business to the US to do that. Now that's a decision on the founder. I mean, what would your perspective be there?
I think what you describe is totally right. So I think definitely, I mean, we will, for the next funding round, definitely look into US capital. I think the type of business that we built, actually, it's a European company as well, security, compliance. That's actually, we even have customers, lots of US businesses that are trying to launch in Europe. And so they are saying, hey, we're not looking at federated learning providers in the US because it doesn't make sense for us. Why would you build this company in the US where you have like ways to get direct access to, at least like from a regulatory perspective, to healthcare data, we want to do that with a party that like knows and has credibility as well in GDPR context. So I think the type of company we're building is a European company. We will definitely as well grow internationally and as well look into this expansion, but more with a, you know, like a business development and a salesperson that is on the ground.
It can be very expensive for some businesses to grow in international markets for what you've just mentioned, the whole regulatory challenges around data.
Well, I would say the US and China are almost anomalies, right? When you look at these kind of ecosystems, because it's usually there's a bunch of much smaller countries that all have different regulations rather than one huge market that has an overarching regulation on it.
Absolutely. And I think like one thing that is like just a competitive edge still here in at least like certain pieces of Europe is like salaries compared to the US, right? If I would expand, where would I go? I would go to either the Boston area or Silicon Valley, right? So that, and I mean, that would double my costs overnight, which is,
and it probably wouldn't double your benefits, right?
And I mean, I still have business over there, right? So I mean, like everyone is working on Zoom, so it's far easier for me to like get someone on the ground there, be a bit flexible with my own working style, and have like my calls at 10 p.m. in the night, which I do at the moment, which is sometimes painful, but it still allows me to build out US business, and everyone is on Zoom. So
great. Okay, good. All right. Well, look, always a bit of a nosy question at the end. Robin, you sound super passionate about Apheris, but outside of Apheris, is it Berlin's restaurants and a music scene, or I don't know, books, cycling, you name it. What's the outside of Apheris work?
Yeah, the outside of Apheris. So first of all, I mean, personally, I have a wonderful 4-year-old son, or like close to 4 years, so getting 4 years in a couple of weeks, which is obviously lots of fun.
So you have 2 4-year-old children.
Yeah, somehow.
Launched both in 19.
Founded both of them at the same time.
And the one keeps on growing linearly. The other one hopefully gets the acceleration.
One's a teenager already, and
hopefully
needs less funding as well.
Okay. So that's keeping busy. I mean, what is, let's say, mixing the vibrant Berlin scene as well, a party scene, with a family and founders life is obviously a challenge. I think I'm finding a good way, because you have the luxury you have here in Berlin is that you can go out at any time. And so what I sometimes do is I keep my regular sleeping pattern, which is getting up at 6 in the morning. But then on the Saturday, I go from 6 to 9 clubbing, and then I come home and have breakfast with the family. So they are like not. I mean,
this is the notorious Berlin night scene, right? Where they're still going until midday the next day.
Sorry, am I missing something here? 6 in the morning.
Right.
Well, because it usually doesn't even start until 3 in the morning.
Oh, so you.
Or it goes 24/7. That is all. Like it goes 24/7 from like Thursday to Tuesday, like 24/7. So you can go like anytime.
Live there.
They're doing work hard, play hard on a whole nother level.
I'd be dead in a year. At my age, anyhow. Wow, that's a cool way of doing it. No, that's very a bit of advice for dad clubbers out there.
If you go to the door, they're like so much thinking, this person has like spent like the entire night, and it's like now going at 6 in the morning, and I'm like, fresh on. I drank my green smoothie beforehand, like fully energetic.
And my cornflakes and
orange juice mixer in your drink.
Very good. Oh wow, that's a great way to end. So look, Robin, been a pleasure talking to you, getting to know you, hearing about Apheris, amazing company. I think you're on a pathway to some great success.